The hammer struck the anvil with a force that sent sparks dancing through the dim interior of the forge, and Fiona Vaughn knew that every ring of metal on metal was another reason for the good people of Dallas, Texas, to whisper about her behind their gloved hands. It was 1878, and a woman had no business working iron and steel, shaping horseshoes and wagon parts, standing with soot-streaked arms and leather apron in a place that belonged to men alone. She had inherited the smithy from her father 2 years ago when fever took him in the winter of 1876, and she had been fighting to keep it ever since. The townspeople had expected her to sell, to find a husband, to do anything except what she did, which was to fire up the forge every morning before dawn and work until her shoulders ached and her hands blistered. At 23 years old, she had calluses that would shame a ranch hand and a reputation that kept respectable women from acknowledging her on the street. The heat from the forge made the Texas summer even more unbearable, but Fiona had learned to ignore discomfort. She plunged the glowing horseshoe into the water trough, watching steam rise in a violent hiss, then examined her work with a critical eye. Perfect. She set it aside with the others and wiped her forehead with the back of her arm, leaving another streak of soot across her skin. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A man was dismounting from a dusty gray gelding outside her forge, his silhouette framed by the bright afternoon sun. He was tall and lean, with the weathered look of someone who spent his life under the open sky. As he stepped into the shade of her workshop, she could see his face more clearly. He had strong features, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of whiskey. His hat was pushed back on dark hair that needed cutting, and his clothes were travel-worn but well-made. "This the blacksmith shop?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight drawl that marked him as a man from somewhere south of here. "It is," Fiona said, straightening to her full height, which still left her a head shorter than him. "What do you need?" He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze taking in her soot-stained face, her rolled-up sleeves, the hammer still in her hand. She waited for the inevitable question, the doubt, the request to speak to the real blacksmith. It always came. "I need work done," he said instead. "A lot of it. I have a ranch about 10 miles west of here, just bought it last month. The previous owner let everything go to hell. I need tools repaired, new hinges for the barn doors, a new brand made, shoes for 6 horses, and probably a dozen other things I have not thought of yet." Fiona felt something shift in her chest, a small crack in the armor she had built around herself. "You want me to do all that?" "That is why I am standing in a blacksmith shop," he said, and there was no mockery in his tone, just simple fact. "Can you do it?" "I can do anything you need," she said, the words coming out fiercer than she intended. "When do you want to start?" "How about now?" He extended his hand. "Ryder Callahan." She hesitated only a moment before gripping his hand. His palm was rough with work, his grip firm but not crushing. "Fiona Vaughn." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Vaughn. Or is it Mrs.?" "Miss," she said. "And it is going to stay that way if the town has anything to say about it. A woman who works a forge is not exactly a prize on the marriage market." Something flickered in his eyes, but his expression remained neutral. "Well then, Miss Vaughn, I guess it is lucky for me that you are available to do my work. Should we discuss terms?" They settled on a price that was fair, more than fair, actually, and Ryder pulled a list from his pocket that had been written in careful, precise handwriting. As he went through each item, Fiona found herself watching his hands, the way he gestured when he talked, the way his whole face became animated when he described his plans for the ranch. "It has been neglected for years," he said, "but the land is good, and the house is solid. I have been working cattle drives for the last 6 years, saving every penny. This is my chance to build something that lasts, something that is mine." "Why Dallas?" she asked, genuinely curious. "There is a land opening up all over Texas." "I like this area," he said. "Good water, not too far from town, but far enough to have some peace. And I heard Dallas was growing, which means there will be markets for beef." He smiled then, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. Plus, I heard there was a blacksmith here who could do quality work. You heard about me? The words came out before she could stop them. His smile faded slightly. I heard there was a smithy in Dallas. Did not know anything about who ran it until I got here and asked around. The folks at the general store had some interesting things to say. I can imagine, Fiona said bitterly. Let me guess. They told you I was unwomanly, that my work was shoddy, that you should ride to the next town if you wanted real metal work. Actually, they said your work was the best in 3 counties, but that you were difficult. Ryder's eyes held hers. They seemed to think difficult meant you did not appreciate men telling you how to do your job. Despite herself, Fiona felt a smile tugging at her lips. That is a fairly accurate assessment. Well, I am not here to tell you how to work metal, Ryder said. I am here to pay you to do it right. When can you start? Tomorrow morning, Fiona said. Bring the tools that need repair, and we can go over the specifications for everything else. I will be here at dawn, Ryder said. He settled his hat back on his head and turned to leave, then paused. Miss Vaughn, thank you. I know I could have gone elsewhere, but I would rather work with someone who knows what they are doing. After he left, Fiona stood in her forge for a long time, staring at the list he had given her. It was more work than she had seen in months. The townspeople who needed a blacksmith usually went to her reluctantly after making sure no one was watching, and they never gave her large orders. They treated her like a shameful secret, a necessary evil because the nearest other smithy was a day's ride away. But Ryder Callahan had walked in like it was the most natural thing in the world, a woman working a forge. He had not questioned her ability or her right to be there. He had simply told her what he needed and asked if she could do it. She realized she was still smiling as she banked the forge fire for the night. The next morning, Ryder arrived just as the sun was painting the sky pink and gold. He had a wagon loaded with tools in various states of disrepair, and he helped her unload them with an efficiency that spoke of years of hard work. As they carried the items into her workshop, Fiona found herself acutely aware of his presence, the way he moved, the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. You said you needed a new brand, she said, forcing her mind back to business. What design? He pulled out a piece of paper with a sketch on it. It was a simple but elegant design. 2 letters R and C intertwined with a rising sun behind them. Callahan Ranch, he said. New beginning. I can have this done in 3 days, Fiona said, studying the design. It is good work. Who drew this? I did, he said, sounding almost embarrassed. I am not much of an artist, but I wanted something that meant something, you know? It is perfect, she said honestly. Clean lines, easy to read, distinctive. This will make a good brand. She could feel his pleasure at her words, and when she looked up, he was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. For a moment they stood there in the morning light, surrounded by the tools of her trade, and something unspoken passed between them. The moment broke when old Mrs. Henderson walked by on the street and made a loud tisking sound, her disapproval clear even from a distance. Ryder glanced out at the street, then back at Fiona. Does that happen a lot? He asked quietly. Every day, Fiona said, her voice flat. You should probably know, Mr. Callahan, that being seen with me is not going to do much for your reputation in this town. I am about as popular as a rattlesnake in a boot. Good thing I am building a ranch outside of town then, Ryder said. And it is just Ryder, please. Mr. Callahan was my father. Over the next few days, Ryder came by the forge every morning and stayed until evening, helping however he could. At first, Fiona protested, saying she worked alone, but he simply ignored her and kept handing her tools, stoking the fire when it needed it, and generally making himself useful. She found that she did not mind his presence as much as she thought she would. He did not talk just to fill the silence, and when he did speak, it was usually something worth hearing. He told her about his years on the cattle drives, the storms and the stampedes, the endless stars, and the loneliness of the trail. He told her about his family back in Louisiana, his 3 brothers and 2 sisters, his mother who had been a school teacher, and his father who had died in the war. "Why did you not stay there?" Fiona asked one afternoon as she worked on reshaping a plow blade. "In Louisiana, I mean, with your family." "Too many memories," Ryder said, "and not enough opportunities. My older brother inherited the family land, which is as it should be. The rest of us had to make our own way. Texas seemed like the place to do it." "And you do not mind being alone out here?" He was quiet for a moment, watching the sparks fly as she hammered the metal. "I have been alone for a long time, Fiona. At least here it is my choice." She noticed that he had started using her first name sometime in the past few days, and she had not objected. It felt natural, comfortable, like they had known each other far longer than a week. "What about you?" he asked. "Your father taught you the trade?" "He did," Fiona said. "My mother died when I was 7, and my father never remarried. I used to come to the forge after school, and he would let me work the bellows, then hand him tools. Eventually, he started teaching me the craft itself. He said I had good hands for it, steady and strong." She smiled at the memory, even though it hurt. The town thought it was scandalous, but my father did not care much what people thought. He said a skill was a skill, and it should not matter if you wore a dress or trousers. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Fiona said softly. "I miss him every day." "He would be proud of you," Ryder said. "Keeping this place going, doing good work despite everything. That takes courage." Fiona felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words, how much she had been craving any kind of validation or respect. The townspeople made her feel like a freak, an aberration, something to be ashamed of. But Ryder looked at her like she was just a person doing her job well. "Thank you," she managed to say. By the end of the second week, Fiona had completed most of the items on Ryder's list. The brand was finished, a beautiful piece of work that would last for years. She had repaired his tools, forged new hinges that swung smooth and true, and was working on the last of the horseshoes. "I should probably tell you," Ryder said one evening as they were closing up the forge, "that bringing my business here has not gone over well with certain people in town." Fiona looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "The mayor's son, Lawrence something, he stopped me at the saloon yesterday. Said I was making a mistake working with you, that there were other blacksmiths who could do better work. Implied pretty heavily that I was only coming here because I had improper intentions toward you." Heat flooded Fiona's face, but it was anger more than embarrassment. "Lawrence Morrison, he has been trying to drive me out of business since my father died. His cousin owns a smithy in the next town over." "That explains it," Ryder said. "He seemed to take it personally that I was not interested in his advice. Got a bit heated about it, actually." "I am sorry," Fiona said. "I should have warned you. This town does not like me much, and they really do not like anyone who does business with me. You can take your work elsewhere if it is going to cause you trouble." Ryder stepped closer, and in the fading light, his eyes were intense. "Fiona, I do not give a damn what Lawrence Morrison or anyone else in this town thinks. You are doing excellent work, you charge fair prices, and you treat me with respect. That is all that matters to me. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I am beginning to think those improper intentions might not be entirely inaccurate." Fiona's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I come here every day, not just because you are a good blacksmith, though you are. I come here because I like being around you. I like talking to you. I like the way you do not back down from anything, the way you have built this life for yourself, even though everyone told you it was impossible." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a smudge of soot. "I am saying that I would very much like to court you properly, if you would allow it." For a moment, Fiona could not speak. She had given up on the idea of romance years ago, resigned herself to a life alone, because no man in Dallas would look twice at a woman who worked with her hands and smelled of smoke and metal. But here was Ryder, looking at her like she was something precious, something worth pursuing. "I am not exactly the marrying kind," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "At least that is what everyone says." "I do not care what everyone says," Ryder said. "I care what you say. Do you want this, Fiona? Do you want to see where this could go?" She thought about the past 2 weeks, about how right it had felt to have him in her forge, how the work had seemed less lonely with him there. She thought about his laugh, his stories, the way he looked at her like she was capable and strong and worthwhile. She thought about how her heart had started racing every morning when she heard his horse approaching, how disappointed she felt when evening came and he had to leave. "Yes," she said, "I want this." He smiled then, that warm, transforming smile, and leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and careful, a question more than a demand. She kissed him back, her soot-stained hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, the sun had set completely, leaving them in the soft darkness of early night. Fireflies had started their evening dance, tiny lights flickering in the warm air. "I should probably tell you," Fiona said, still standing close to him, "that courting me is going to make your life significantly more difficult. The town is going to have opinions, and none of them will be good." "Let them have their opinions," Ryder said. "I have faced down stampedes and storms. I think I can handle some small-minded gossip." But handling it proved more challenging than either of them had anticipated. Within days, word had spread through Dallas that the new rancher was courting the woman Blacksmith. The reaction was swift and harsh. Women who had previously been civil to Ryder suddenly found reasons to cross the street when they saw him coming. Men at the saloon made crude jokes about what a woman like Fiona must be like behind closed doors, implying that any woman who worked like a man must have other unnatural tendencies as well. Lawrence Morrison was the worst of them all. He started a rumor that Fiona's work was dangerous, that her horseshoes fell off, that her repairs broke under stress. It was all lies, but lies have a way of spreading faster than truth. Several of Fiona's regular customers stopped coming by, and one man even demanded his money back on work she had done months ago, claiming it was faulty, even though there was nothing wrong with it. Through it all, Ryder remained steadfast. He started taking Fiona to Sunday services, sitting with her in the back pew, where the stares and whispers could not be avoided. He walked with her through town, his hand on her elbow, making it clear to everyone that he was not ashamed to be seen with her. And every evening, he would stay late at the forge, talking with her as she worked, helping clean up, stealing kisses when they were hidden from prying eyes. "You do not have to do this," Fiona told him one Sunday, after a particularly brutal service where the preacher had given a sermon about women knowing their proper place. "I am used to being alone. I have been managing it for years." They were sitting on the porch of her small house behind the forge, watching the sun set over Dallas. Ryder took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I am not doing this out of pity or obligation," he said firmly. "I am doing this because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is seeing you. Because when something good happens, you are the person I want to tell. Because when I imagine my future, you are in it, right there beside me." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I love you, Fiona Vaughn. I know it has only been a few weeks, but I know my own heart. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you refuse to let anyone make you less than you are. I love that you can shape metal with your bare hands and still have the softest touch. I love everything about you, and I do not care who knows it." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. She had never expected to hear those words from anyone, had convinced herself that she did not need them. But hearing them now from Ryder, she realized how much she had been craving exactly this. Someone who saw her for who she truly was and loved her anyway. Loved her because of who she was, not despite it. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you the moment you walked into my forge and did not question whether I could do the work. You made me feel like I was not fighting the world alone anymore." He kissed her then, deep and thorough. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Marry me," Ryder said. "I know it is fast, but marry me anyway. Come live at the ranch with me. You can keep the forge going if you want, or we can find someone to buy it, whatever you want, as long as you say yes." Fiona's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "What about my work? I am not going to give up being a blacksmith just because I am married." "I would never ask you to," Ryder said. "We can build a forge at the ranch if you want, or you can keep this one and ride into town to work. Hell, you can do both if that is what makes you happy. I am not asking you to change." "Fiona, I am asking you to build a life with me exactly as you are." She thought about it for approximately 3 seconds. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." His whoop of joy was loud enough to startle a flock of birds from a nearby tree, and then he was lifting her up and spinning her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and this time there was a promise in it, a future spreading out before them like the wide Texas sky. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church with only a handful of people present. Most of the town stayed away, making their disapproval clear through their absence. But Ryder's foreman, an older man named Joe who had signed on to help run the ranch, stood as witness, along with Sarah Chen, the Chinese woman who ran the laundry and who had always been kind to Fiona. The preacher performed the ceremony with obvious reluctance, but he performed it nonetheless. And when Ryder kissed his bride, Fiona felt like her heart might actually take flight. The reception was held at the ranch, which Fiona was seeing for the first time as Ryder's wife. As they rode up to the property in the wagon, she understood immediately why he had fallen in love with this place. The house was a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The land rolled gently, dotted with oak trees and wildflowers. A creek ran through the eastern section, providing good water year-round. The barn and outbuildings needed work, but the bones were solid. "It is beautiful," Fiona said softly. "It is ours," Ryder said, helping her down from the wagon. "Every inch of it we will build together." Joe had prepared a simple meal for them, and Sarah had brought a cake she had baked herself. They ate and talked and laughed, and for the first time in years, Fiona felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was part of something bigger than just herself and her forge. When night fell and their guests departed, Ryder carried Fiona over the threshold of their home. The bedroom upstairs was simply furnished but clean, and moonlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in silver. "Are you nervous?" Ryder asked softly, setting her down gently. "A little," Fiona admitted. "I have never done this before." "Neither have I," he said, and the honesty in his voice made her love him even more. "We will figure it out together." And they did, with tenderness and patience and a growing passion that surprised them both. Ryder was gentle with her, always checking to make sure she was comfortable, always putting her pleasure before his own. When they finally came together completely, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, 2 pieces that had been searching for each other finally clicking into place. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Fiona's head on Ryder's chest, listening to his heartbeat slowly return to normal. "I never thought I would have this," she murmured. "A husband who loves me, a home, a future that does not involve being alone." "You will never be alone again," Ryder promised, his arms tightening around her. "I am here, and I am staying. Whatever comes, we face it together." The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Fiona divided her time between the ranch and the forge in town, refusing to give up her craft entirely. She still got plenty of disapproving looks when she rode into Dallas, especially now that she wore a wedding ring, but the hostility had lessened somewhat. It was one thing to shame an unmarried woman for unwomanly behavior. It was another to criticize a wife who was helping support her husband's ranch. Ryder never tried to stop her from working, never complained about the hours she spent at the forge or the way she came home smelling of smoke and metal. Instead, he built her a smaller forge on the ranch property, a beautiful stone structure with good ventilation and plenty of space for her tools. She could do smaller projects there, and it meant she did not have to ride into town every single day. The ranch itself was thriving. Ryder had a good eye for cattle, and the herd he had started building was healthy and strong. Joe proved to be an invaluable foreman, and they hired two more hands to help with the daily work. Fiona found herself pitching in wherever she was needed, mending fences, helping with the branding, even cooking meals for the hands when necessary. She also discovered that she had a talent for the business side of ranching. Her mathematical mind, trained by years of calculating measurements and costs for metalwork, adapted easily to managing accounts and planning cattle sales. Ryder was happy to let her take over that aspect of the operation, freely admitting that he was better with animals than with account books. But their happiness was not without challenges. Lawrence Morrison continued to cause problems, spreading rumors about the ranch, trying to undermine Ryder's reputation with other ranchers. He told people that Callahan Ranch was poorly managed, that the cattle were diseased, that anyone who did business with Ryder was a fool. Things came to a head one afternoon in late autumn. Fiona was at her town forge, working on a commission for a rancher from the next county over, when Lawrence stormed in with two of his friends. "You need to leave Dallas," Lawrence said without preamble. "You and your husband both. This town does not want you here." Fiona set down her hammer slowly, her eyes fixed on Lawrence. "This is my property, Lawrence. My father built this forge, and I have every right to be here. If you do not have legitimate business, then you need to leave." "Legitimate business?" Lawrence sneered. "You are a disgrace to this town, Fiona. A woman playing at being a man, and now you have corrupted some foolish cowboy into thinking you are worth marrying. Everyone knows what you really are." "And what is that?" Fiona asked, her voice dangerous and quiet. "A freak," Lawrence spat. "An abomination. Women like you should not exist." Before Fiona could respond, a voice came from the doorway. "You need to leave now." Ryder stood there, his face harder than Fiona had ever seen it. He must have been coming to meet her for lunch, as he often did. Behind him, she could see several other men, including Joe and some of the town's more respected citizens. Lawrence turned, his face flushing. "This is none of your business, Callahan. You are threatening my wife in her own place of business," Ryder said, his voice cold. "That makes it very much my business, and I think you will find that I am not the only one who has had enough of your poison." One of the men behind Ryder stepped forward. It was Harold Greenfield, who owned the largest ranch in the county. "Morrison, I have known your family for years, and I respected your father. But you are a bully and a coward. Fiona Vaughn does good work, better than most men I have met. The fact that she happens to be a woman makes her more impressive, not less. Now, I suggest you apologize to her and her husband, and then remove yourself before this gets ugly." Lawrence looked around at the assembled men, and for the first time, Fiona saw uncertainty in his eyes. He had counted on the town's general disapproval of her to give him power, but it seemed that not everyone shared his views as completely as he had thought. "You are all fools," he finally said, but the bluster was gone from his voice. He turned and left, his friends trailing behind him. After they were gone, Fiona let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Ryder came to her immediately, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she said, then looked at the men who had come with him. "Thank you, all of you. You did not have to do that." "Yes, we did," Harold said gruffly. "This town has treated you poorly, Fiona, and it is past time that changed. You do good work, you pay your debts, you do not cause trouble for anyone. That makes you a valuable member of this community. regardless of what narrow-minded fools like Lawrence think. Over the next few weeks, Fiona noticed a distinct shift in how the town treated her. It was not a complete transformation. There were still those who disapproved and made sure she knew it. But more people started bringing her work, started nodding to her on the street, started treating her like a person instead of a scandal. It helped that the ranch was clearly succeeding. Ryder's first cattle sale had been a tremendous success, and word spread that Callahan Ranch was a well-run operation producing quality beef. Respect for Ryder translated into grudging acceptance of Fiona, and she would take what she could get. Winter came to North Texas, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional freezing rain. Fiona spent more time at the ranch forge during these months, enjoying the warmth of her own hearth and the comfort of being close to Ryder. They developed routines, comfortable patterns of living that felt like they had been together for years instead of months. On Christmas Eve, Ryder gave her a gift that made her cry. It was a sign for her forge, beautifully carved and painted, Vaughn and Callahan Metalworks. Quality craftsmanship, since 1868. You kept your father's legacy alive, Ryder said as she traced the letters with her fingers. And now we are building our own together. I wanted you to know that I see that I value it. It is perfect, Fiona whispered. You are perfect. Hardly, he said with a smile, but I try to be worthy of you. That night, as they lay together in their warm bed while sleet tapped against the windows, Fiona felt a contentment she had never known before. She had everything she had ever wanted, even things she had not known she wanted. A man who loved her unconditionally, a home that was truly hers, work that fulfilled her, and a future that stretched bright and promising before them. What are you thinking about? Ryder asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. About how different my life is now compared to a year ago, Fiona said. Last Christmas, I was alone in my little house behind the forge, wondering if I would be able to keep the business going another year, certain that I would spend my whole life alone. And now look at me. I know the feeling, Ryder said. Last Christmas, I was on a cattle drive, sleeping on frozen ground, dreaming about having my own place someday, but not sure it would ever happen, and certainly not imagining that I would find someone like you. Someone like me? Fiona teased. You mean stubborn and covered in soot? I mean strong and brave and beautiful, Ryder said seriously. I mean someone who knows her own worth and refuses to let anyone diminish it. I mean the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with, building something good together. Fiona kissed him then, deep and slow, and they made love with the tenderness of two people who had found in each other something precious and rare. Spring brought new challenges and new joys. The ranch herd had grown significantly, and Ryder hired additional hands to help manage the increased workload. Fiona continued to work her forge, taking on larger and more complex projects as her reputation spread beyond Dallas. She made gates and railings for the new bank being built in town, crafted a beautiful weather vine for the church, and even received a commission from Fort Worth for specialized hardware. It was in early April that Fiona realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. At first, she attributed it to stress or perhaps a change in her body from all the physical work. But when the nausea started and her breasts became tender and she found herself crying at the smallest things, she knew. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear. She wanted this baby, wanted to start a family with Ryder. But she also worried about what it would mean for her work, for the forge she had fought so hard to keep. Would she be able to continue blacksmithing while pregnant? What about after the baby came? She decided to tell Ryder that evening over dinner. She had made his favorite meal, beef stew with fresh bread. And as they sat at their table, she found herself nervous in a way she had not been since their wedding night. I have something to tell you, she said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ryder immediately looked concerned. What is wrong? Are you all right? I am fine, she said quickly. Better than fine, actually. I am pregnant, Ryder. We're going to have a baby. The expression on his face went through several rapid changes: shock, confusion, and then pure, radiant joy. He stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his chair, coming around the table to pull her into his arms. A baby, he said, his voice choked with emotion. We are going to have a baby. Fiona, this is wonderful. This is the best news I could possibly imagine. You are happy? She asked, relief flooding through her. Happy? He pulled back to look at her, and there were tears in his eyes. Fiona, I am overjoyed. Terrified but overjoyed. We are going to be parents. They held each other for a long time, both of them crying and laughing in equal measure. When they finally separated, Ryder insisted that she sit down, that she rest, that she should not be lifting anything heavy. Ryder, Fiona said patiently, I am pregnant, not made of glass. I can still work, still do everything I was doing before. But should you, he asked, his worry clear, all that heat and heavy lifting, is that safe for the baby? Women have been working while pregnant since the beginning of time, Fiona said. I will be careful, and I will stop when it becomes too difficult. But for now, I am fine. I need to keep working, Ryder. It is part of who I am. He nodded slowly, though she could see the concern still lingering in his eyes. Promise me you will be careful. Promise me that if anything feels wrong, you will stop immediately. I promise, she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. I want this baby as much as you do. I am not going to take any risks. Over the next few months, Fiona continued to work, though she did make concessions to her changing body. She took on fewer projects that required extended periods at the hottest part of the forge. She let Ryder and Joe handle the heavier lifting, and she started training a young man from town, Thomas Whitley, who was interested in learning the blacksmith trade. He was 18, earnest, and had a good eye for the work. Having an apprentice meant she could delegate some of the more physically demanding tasks while still maintaining control over the quality of the output. The town's reaction to her pregnancy was mixed. Some people seemed to think that becoming a mother would finally make her respectable, that she would now give up her unfeminine pursuits and settle into proper domesticity. Others whispered that it was a shame to bring a child into a household where the mother worked like a man. Fiona ignored all of it. She had learned that she could not control what people thought of her, and trying to do so was a waste of energy. What mattered was her family, her work, and the life she and Ryder were building together. As summer turned to fall, her belly grew round and prominent. She had to modify her leather apron to accommodate her changing shape, and she moved more slowly than she used to. But she was still working, still creating beautiful and functional metalwork, still proving that a woman could do this job as well as any man. In October, as the leaves were turning gold and red, Fiona went into labor. It started early in the morning, a tightening in her back that gradually moved to her belly. Ryder wanted to fetch the doctor immediately, but Fiona insisted they wait. Labor could take hours, and there was no point in panicking yet. By afternoon, the pains were coming more regularly, and Ryder rode into town to bring back Dr. Elias Matthews, a kind older man who had been delivering babies in Dallas for 30 years. Sarah Chen also came, having been asked to help with the birth. She had assisted at many deliveries in the Chinese community and knew what to do. The labor was long and difficult. Fiona had known it would not be easy, but the reality was harder than she had imagined. Wave after wave of pain crashed over her, and there were moments when she thought she could not endure another second. But Sarah held her hand and talked her through each contraction, and Ryder stayed by her side, his face pale, but his presence steady and reassuring. Finally, just after midnight, with one last tremendous effort, Fiona pushed their baby into the world. The cry that followed was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. It is a boy, Dr. Matthews announced, holding up the squalling, red-faced infant. A healthy baby boy. Ryder was openly weeping as the doctor placed their son in Fiona's arms. He was perfect, tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. He had a shock of dark hair like his father and his mother's determined chin, and when he opened his eyes, they were a deep, unfocused blue that would probably change color in the coming weeks. "Hello, little one," Fiona whispered, exhausted but filled with a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Welcome to the world. What should we name him?" Ryder asked, his finger gently stroking the baby's impossibly soft cheek. They had discussed names but had never quite settled on one. Now looking at their son, Fiona knew exactly what he should be called. "Robert," she said. "Robert Thomas Callahan, after my father and yours." "Robert," Ryder repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for our son." The early months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Robert was a hungry baby who woke frequently during the night, and both Fiona and Ryder walked around in a perpetual state of sleep deprivation. But every smile, every small milestone, every moment of holding their son made it all worthwhile. Fiona had intended to return to the forge within a few weeks of giving birth, but she found herself reluctant to leave Robert for long periods. She compromised by bringing him with her to the ranch forge, setting up a cradle where she could watch him while she worked on smaller projects. Thomas handled most of the work at the town forge, with Fiona checking in regularly to review his progress and take on projects that required her more experienced hand. It was not the arrangement she had imagined, but it worked. And as Robert grew from an infant into a curious, active toddler, she found new ways to balance her roles as mother and blacksmith. Ryder was an attentive father, never complaining when she needed to work, always willing to watch Robert so she could spend time at the forge. The ranch continued to prosper. They added more land, expanded the herd, and built a reputation for quality cattle and honest dealing. Fiona's metalwork business also grew, with commissions coming from all over North Texas. Thomas proved to be a talented apprentice, and eventually she made him a partner in the town forge, freeing her to focus more on the ranch and her family while still maintaining her craft. When Robert was 2 years old, Fiona found herself pregnant again. This time, she was less anxious about how to manage work and motherhood, having learned that she could do both if she was flexible and willing to adapt. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose Margaret, was born in the spring of 1882. She had her mother's red gold hair and her father's whiskey-colored eyes, and from the moment she could crawl, she was following her older brother everywhere. Life settled into a rhythm that was busy but fulfilling. The children grew, the ranch thrived, and Fiona's reputation as a master blacksmith became firmly established. The town that had once shunned her now took pride in having such a skilled craftswoman in their community. Young women occasionally came to watch her work, inspired by the idea that they too might pursue unconventional paths. One such young woman was Emma Reeves, the daughter of a local farmer. She was 17, restless and intelligent, and she reminded Fiona very much of herself at that age. Emma started coming by the forge regularly, asking questions, begging to learn. After discussing it with Ryder, Fiona agreed to take her on as an apprentice. "You are giving her the gift my father gave me," Fiona told Ryder one evening as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. The gift of possibility, of knowing that she does not have to accept the limitations other people try to place on her. "You have given that gift to a lot of people," Ryder said, his arm around her shoulders, "including me. You taught me that real strength is not about forcing people into boxes they do not fit. It is about letting them be who they truly are." Fiona leaned into him, content. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as Robert helped his little sister catch fireflies, their laughter ringing out across the ranch. Years passed in this pleasant fashion. Robert grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the cattle and learning about ranching from his father. Rose, on the other hand, was fascinated by the forge. By the time she was 8, she was spending every free moment watching her mother work, and Fiona began teaching her the basics of the craft. In 1887, when Fiona was 32 and Ryder was 34, they welcomed their third child, another son they named Daniel James. He was a happy, easygoing baby who seemed perfectly content to be carried around on his father's back while Ryder worked the ranch. The town of Dallas had grown considerably since Fiona and Ryder had first met. What had once been a small frontier town was becoming a real city, with paved streets and electric lights, and a railroad that connected it to the rest of the country. The ranch had grown too, now one of the most successful operations in the county. But despite all the changes, some things remained constant. Fiona still worked her forge, though these days she was training more than she was producing. Thomas ran the town smithy with skill and pride, and Emma had become a talented blacksmith in her own right, eventually opening her own small forge in Fort Worth. Rose, now in her teens, was already as skilled as many journeyman blacksmiths, and Fiona knew that when the time came, her daughter would carry on the family tradition. It was a warm evening in May of 1893, 15 years after Ryder had first walked into her forge, that Fiona found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. They were hosting a large gathering at the ranch, celebrating Robert's 16th birthday and his decision to attend college in Austin to study agricultural sciences. The yard was full of people, friends from town, neighboring ranchers, the ranch hands, and their families. Even some of the people who had once shunned Fiona now came to these gatherings, having long since given up their disapproval in the face of her undeniable success and respectability. She stood on the porch, watching the festivities, when Ryder came to stand beside her. He looked much the same as he had 15 years ago, with perhaps a few more lines around his eyes and some silver threading through his dark hair. But his eyes still held that same warmth when he looked at her, that same deep love that had never wavered. "Do you remember the day we met?" she asked him, taking his hand. "Every detail," he said. "You were standing in that forge, covered in soot, looking fierce and beautiful and more capable than anyone I had ever seen. I knew right then that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how completely." "I was so angry at the world back then," Fiona said softly. "So tired of fighting for every scrap of respect, every acknowledgement that I had the right to exist as I was. And then you walked in and just accepted it all like it was the most natural thing in the world. Do you know what that meant to me?" "I think I am starting to understand," Ryder said. "All these years later, watching you teach Rose and Emma, watching you refuse to let anyone tell our daughter that she cannot do something because she is a girl. You have changed more than just your own life, Fiona. You have changed what is possible for other women, for our daughter, for girls who are not even born yet." She felt tears prick her eyes. "I just wanted to make horseshoes and wagon parts. I never set out to change the world. The best revolutions are the ones that happen quietly, one person at a time refusing to accept things as they are," Ryder said. He turned to face her fully, his hands cupping her face. "I love you, Fiona Callahan. I have loved you from the moment I saw you standing in that forge with your hammer raised. I will love you until the day I die, and beyond if such things are possible." "I love you too," she whispered. "You saved me, Ryder. Not from my circumstances, but from believing that I had to face them alone. You stood beside me when no one else would. You believed in me when I was starting to doubt myself. You gave me a family and a home and a love I never thought I would have." He kissed her then, sweet and deep, and around them she heard applause and good-natured cheering from their guests who had noticed the moment. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Robert came bounding up the porch steps, tall and strong at 16, so much like his father, it sometimes took Fiona's breath away. "Ma, Pa, they are asking for you to say something." Ryder and Fiona exchanged glances, then walked hand in hand to the center of the gathering. Ryder raised his hand for quiet, and the crowd settled down. "Thank you all for coming today," Ryder said. "It means the world to us to have so many friends here to celebrate our son's birthday and his bright future. But I also want to take a moment to celebrate someone else. 15 years ago, I rode into Dallas looking for a blacksmith. I found one, the best one I have ever known. She was a woman named Fiona Vaughn, and she was fighting every day to keep her business going in the face of a town that did not want her to succeed. He turned to look at Fiona, and the love in his eyes was so clear that she felt her throat tighten with emotion. I asked her to forge everything I needed, Ryder continued, and she did. But what I did not tell her was that what I needed most was not horseshoes or hinges or brands. What I needed was someone who could teach me what real courage looked like. Someone who could show me that love is not about changing people, but about cherishing them for exactly who they are. She gave me that and so much more. She gave me a family, a partnership, a life richer than I ever imagined possible. So I am asking all of you to raise your glasses to Fiona, the finest blacksmith, the best wife, the most wonderful mother, and the strongest woman I have ever known. To Fiona, the crowd chorused, raising their glasses high. Fiona was crying now, not bothering to hide her tears. Rose came to stand beside her, putting her arm around her mother's waist. At 14, she was already nearly as tall as Fiona, with that same determined expression that Fiona saw in the mirror every day. I am proud to be your daughter, Rose whispered. I am proud that you never gave up, that you showed me I could be anything I wanted to be. I am proud of you too, sweetheart, Fiona said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. So very proud. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Fiona danced with Ryder under the stars, held her children close, talked with friends old and new. She looked around at everything they had built together, this life that had seemed impossible 15 years ago, and felt a deep, abiding gratitude. Later, much later, when all the guests had gone home and the children were asleep in their beds, Fiona and Ryder sat together on their porch as they had done countless times before. The night was warm and clear, the sky scattered with stars. Do you ever regret it? Fiona asked quietly. The gossip, the judgment, all the trouble that came from choosing me. Not for one single second, Ryder said firmly. Every choice I have made since the day I met you has led to this moment, to this life, to our family. How could I possibly regret any of it? You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Fiona. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and sage and home. You saved my forge, you know. If you had not walked in that day with your big order and your easy acceptance, I might not have made it through another year. The business was failing, and I was so tired of fighting alone. We saved each other, Ryder corrected gently. I was alone too, just in a different way. I had convinced myself that I did not need anyone, that building a ranch by myself was enough. You taught me that life is better when it is shared with someone you love, that asking for help is not weakness, but wisdom. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the oak trees, the occasional hoot of an owl. What do you think the future holds? Fiona asked eventually. For us, for the children, for all of this we have built? I think Robert is going to come back from college with all sorts of modern ideas about ranching and drive me crazy trying to implement them, Ryder said with a chuckle. I think Rose is going to be the finest blacksmith in Texas and probably beyond. I think Daniel is going to surprise us all with whatever path he chooses, and I think you and I are going to grow old together, right here on this porch, watching our grandchildren play in that yard. Grandchildren, Fiona said with a laugh. We are not old enough for grandchildren yet. Maybe not yet, Ryder agreed. But someday, and when that day comes, I am going to tell them stories about their grandmother, about how she was the strongest, bravest, most capable woman I ever met, about how she worked a forge in a time when women were not supposed to do such things, and she did it with such skill that no one could deny her talent, about how she changed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone around her, just by refusing to be less than she was. Fiona felt fresh tears sliding down her cheeks, but these were happy tears, tears of fulfillment and joy. And I will tell them about their grandfather, about how he walked into my life when I needed him most and never once asked me to be anything other than myself, about how he stood beside me when the whole town was against me, about how he built a life with me based on mutual respect and love and partnership. That sounds like a good story, Ryder said softly. It is the best story, Fiona said, because it is ours, and it is true, and it has a happy ending. Not an ending, Ryder corrected, pulling her closer. A happy continuation, because this story, our story, is still being written every single day. They kissed then, under the vast Texas sky, two people who had found in each other everything they needed. A woman who had been shunned for her trade, and a cowboy who had said, "Forge everything I need," and had meant so much more than horseshoes and hinges. They had forged a life together, built it from sweat and determination and love, shaped it like iron on an anvil until it became something strong and beautiful and lasting. In the years that followed, their story continued exactly as Ryder had predicted. Robert returned from college with innovative ideas about cattle breeding and ranch management that initially frustrated his father, but eventually proved invaluable. He married a school teacher from Austin named Catherine, and they gave Fiona and Ryder 4 grandchildren who spent their summers at the ranch learning to ride and rope, and in the case of the eldest granddaughter, to work a forge. Rose did indeed become one of the finest blacksmiths in Texas. She expanded the family business, opening forges in 3 different towns and training a dozen apprentices, both men and women. She never married, claiming that she was married to her work, but she had a full and satisfying life surrounded by friends and family and the art she loved. Daniel, true to Ryder's prediction, surprised everyone by becoming a veterinarian, one of the first in the region. He split his time between the ranch and a practice in Dallas, and his expertise with animals became legendary throughout North Texas. Fiona continued to work her forge well into her 60s, though she eventually transitioned primarily to teaching and design work. Her metalwork was displayed in homes and businesses all over Texas, and she took great satisfaction in knowing that her pieces would outlast her by generations. The town of Dallas became a bustling city, but Callahan Ranch remained a constant, an oasis of tradition and family values, just outside the urban sprawl. Fiona and Ryder expanded the house as their family grew, adding rooms for visiting children and grandchildren, but they kept their original bedroom, the place where they had started their life together. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908, Ryder once again gave Fiona a gift that made her cry. It was a sculpture he had commissioned from a talented metalworker in Fort Worth, created to Ryder's specifications. It showed a blacksmith at work, hammer raised, captured in a moment of pure concentration and strength. The face was clearly modeled after Fiona, but idealized, made heroic and larger than life. "This is how I have always seen you," Ryder said, as Fiona stared at the sculpture through her tears. "Strong, capable, beautiful in your element. I wanted you to see yourself the way I see you." They placed the sculpture in the front yard of the ranch, where everyone who visited could see it. It became something of a landmark, and people would point it out to their children and tell them the story of Fiona Vaughn Callahan, the woman blacksmith who had refused to let anyone tell her what she could not do. As they grew older together, Fiona and Ryder's love only deepened. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, had faced challenges and celebrated triumphs, had raised children and built a legacy. Through it all, they had remained partners in every sense of the word, supporting each other, challenging each other, loving each other with a constancy that never wavered. One summer evening in 1912, when Fiona was 57 and Ryder was 59, they sat on their familiar porch, watching the sun set over the land they had worked for more than 3 decades. Their hands were clasped together, fingers intertwined in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Have I told you today that I love you?" Ryder asked, his voice still strong despite his years. "Only twice," Fiona said with a smile. "You are falling behind." "Then let me say it again. I love you, Fiona Callahan." I have loved you for 34 years, and I will love you for all the years we have left and beyond. I love you too, Fiona said, squeezing his hand. Thank you for the life we have built together. Thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me, that first day in the forge. Thank you for never trying to change me or diminish me or make me into something I was not. Thank you for being my partner, my love, my home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, they sat together in perfect contentment. Their story, which had begun with a woman shunned for her trade and a cowboy who had asked her to forge everything he needed, had become a testament to the power of love and respect and mutual support. They had built something that would last long after they were gone, not just in the ranch and the forge and the family they had created, but in the example they had set. A woman could be strong without being unwomanly. A man could be supportive without being weak. Love could transcend social expectations and create something beautiful and lasting. These were the truths they had lived, and these were the lessons they would leave behind. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, one by one, Fiona and Ryder remained on their porch, two people who had found in each other everything they needed to forge a life of meaning, purpose, and profound, enduring love. The hammer and the anvil, the heat and the shaping, the patience and the skill, all these things had come together to create something strong and true and beautiful. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a happily ever after earned through courage and determination and an unwavering commitment to each other. In the morning, they would rise and continue their work as they always had. But tonight, they simply sat together under the Texas stars, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy that had brought them to this place. The forge still stood, both in town and on the ranch, testament to a woman who had refused to be shunned. The ranch still thrived, testament to a man who had recognized value and talent regardless of convention. And their love still burned bright, a flame that had been kindled 34 years ago and would never be extinguished. It was, in every way, a perfect ending to a story that had seemed impossible from the start. But as Ryder had said all those years ago, it was not an ending at all. It was simply a continuation, the ongoing narrative of a life well lived and a love well earned. As long as their children and grandchildren remembered their story, as long as women looked at Fiona's example and dared to pursue their own dreams, as long as men looked at Ryder's example and learned to support rather than suppress, their legacy would live on. The woman blacksmith had been shunned for her trade. The cowboy had said, "Forge everything I need." Together, they had forged a life that became a legend, a love story for the ages, a reminder that the strongest metal is tempered in the hottest fire, and the truest love is built on a foundation of respect, acceptance, and unwavering partnership. And they lived happily, fully, completely, surrounded by family and legacy and love for all the rest of their days.